Last year in October, I wrote this article on smashjt.com saying the AAA video game industry is dying. Here's why. Thomas Mahler calls out the decline in AAA studios and nails the problem behind modern gaming's struggles. And Thomas Mahler is the guy behind Ori and the Blind Forest and Will of the Wisps. And he says, it's absolutely not a surprise to me that a lot of AAA studios have been struggling lately. And my prediction is that it won't really get any better anytime soon. And I covered this previously in another video. I'm not going to go through the entire, because it was a very long post that I break down and talk about each section of it, how he compares it to a music band, all this other stuff. And he had a tiff with Alyssa Mercante, which at this point, who hasn't gotten into it with her? And I wanted to bring that up because it's starting to come up again now. I posted this on October 18th, almost 1 year later. I said, source, I've heard word from a trusted insider that generally investors are abandoning the mid-tier gaming space entirely. Pattern keeps repeating. They invest, extract IP, pull out, and move on. There's no new money for creative studios anymore. Everything is shifting toward AI or government-backed projects. Mid-sized and indie developers are barely surviving, relying on dying giants just to stay afloat. Surprisingly, AAA doesn't care. This incoming collapse actually ironically works in their favor. Less competition, more consolidation, and full control over whatever gets made. And then we had an update from Gothic Therapy the other day. This is called Exclusive AAA Extinction. Investors brace for the end of AAA gaming in 2026.
In 2026, the gaming industry changes forever. For years, people have been guessing why everything feels like it's starting to fall apart. Budgets, toxic gamers, DEI, take your pick. But those are the symptoms, not the cause. Behind the scenes, investors already know what's coming. And for the first time, so do we. We got access to investor material, the kind of data you only see in closed-door meetings. This isn't another gaming is dying video. This is the part nobody was supposed to see. 2026 might be the year AAA gaming dies, and no one is ready for it.
I will say that if things stay on the current trajectory, this will 100% happen, what they say in this video. But there's a lot of factors, a lot of variables that will change this along the way. And typically, it's going to have macroeconomic things like the Fed lowering interest rates, money becoming cheaper to loan, and that kind of stuff. And that typically starts to happen when it goes across the board. And if it's starting to feel the pinch in the gaming industry, it's typically in other industries as well. And that's when the Fed gets involved to start easing the access of money. If that doesn't happen, there's going to be a major downfall in gaming.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm Master of the TDS.
And I'm Riding Raven.
And today, we're opening the door.
Into the Twilight Zone?
Not quite, but it's a door into the part of the industry nobody was supposed to see. Before we go any further, let's make something clear. The material came from a gaming industry executive who sat in on a private investor session. None of it is under NDA. Technically, it's public, just not something most people would ever get access to. And that's why it matters.
And before anyone panics, this is exactly why we are allowed to cover it. Sorry to disappoint all the haters hoping we get taken down.
Haters will have to cope, because this was a high-level panel with people who manage billions in gaming investment. People who fund studios, advise publishers, and quietly steer the direction of the entire industry. And they weren't holding back. They were talking openly about what's happening right now and what's coming in 2026.
And no, we're not naming our source. We like this person. We want them to keep their job. And honestly, the important part isn't who they are. It's what the investors are saying.
Exactly. And to put it lightly, they're concerned. The material lays out exactly what they expect in 2026, and none of it looks good.
Concerned is the polite version. To be blunt, they're bracing for the total collapse of the AAA industry as we know it. Yes, you heard that right. Video game Armageddon is coming.
And this is like what we've been seeing. I don't want to speak for myself. Like anyone that's playing games right now is like, no one cares. Across the board, people are just like, okay, no new games. All right. Like we'll because guess what? There'll still be AAA games coming, and they'll be coming from China, Asia, Japan, not America.
The investors kept circling a few major pressure points they believe are going to push the industry over the edge.
And we're going to break those down in terms us mortals can understand. No finance degree required.
One of the biggest things investors are worried about hits AAA at its foundation. The rules around minors in games are tightening right now, and by April of 2026, the new COPPA compliance deadline lands.
What is COPPA, you ask? COPPA is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Protecting kids is good. Everyone agrees with that. But the updated rules don't just change what counts as children's data. They also change what games can be treated as child-directed, and that is where the real problem starts.
And oftentimes when they start doing these regulations, they unforeseen accidents and destroying industries because they forget to carve out things, and it impacts other areas that weren't intended to be impacted, or does impact that they intended to impact.
Originally, COPPA covered names, emails, basic identifiers. The update expands that to biometric and behavioral data, voice patterns, eye tracking, facial analysis, movement data, basically anything a system can pull from you that can be turned into a profile and then sold to advertisers.
Advertisers getting our data isn't new, but people have no idea how constant it is. Most games collect some version of this without us even noticing, especially multiplayer, which means any studio using these systems is suddenly exposed to massive fines if they mishandle it.
And here's the catch. Companies cannot collect or process that data from minors without...
By the way, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want these studios collecting data from minors. That's always been my standpoint with that.
Verified parental consent. Real verification. We've already seen platforms like YouTube roll out age verification, and now we understand why.
They're protecting themselves early. And here's the part that really matters. With biometric and behavioral data now protected, and the FTC already forcing parental consent for under 16 monetization in real cases, these changes start hitting teen data too. And unless your grandmother's knitting club is secretly a Fortnite squad, most people playing these games are teens.
So when that age group becomes the most regulated, the entire monetization framework holding AAA together gets cut off at the source. Studios now need oversight, not just for kids, but for teens as well.
Studios built on teens being their main revenue stream will have to rebuild.
What's going to happen is it's all going to be done by AI. It just is. They're going to boil it down to tell the government, okay, what are the rules that we need to follow? Okay, we're going to use AI to implement that. And that way it's not our problem anymore. AI is going to just do everything for us.
From the ground up. And most won't survive.
Because everything else is unaffordable.
At that point, the studio becomes a headless chicken running around with whatever guts it had left spilled all over the floor.
This is red tape city. Over-regulation, over-rules to prevent. It strangles.
Well, gather up what's left of those guts and stick a fork in that chicken, because that is only the first way AAA is getting cooked. Now, the next point investors were worried about is where things get dangerous. We talked about children and teen data, but biometric data by itself is a whole separate problem. Some states already regulate biometrics, and in those places, courts have ruled that every single biometric scan counts as its own violation.
Not per user, per scan. Every time the system pulls data from you, that's another fine. That will drain a bank account faster than a lawyer with a grudge.
To be fair, Illinois just moved to cap that kind of per scan tracking, which tells you how insane the liability was. But investors expect other states to copy the original rule before it gets capped.
And just to put this into perspective, the average VR game scans your face about 60 times per second. Eye tracking, micro expression, spatial orientation, all of it. It sees into your very soul.
Breaking that down,
They're going to need to carve this out of it because otherwise it basically shuts off the ability to play anything in VR ever.
In all seriousness, this is not sustainable. A single VR session could stack enough penalties to wipe out a studio instantly. And if that enforcement model goes mainstream, VR is more dead than it already looks.
regulation is one thing, courtrooms are another. And if the first two risks weren't enough to convince you the AAA apocalypse is coming, this one will.
You've probably seen a handful of game-related lawsuits float by. A headline here, a case there, the video game addiction filings, the video games cause violence stuff, a kid spending thousands on Raid Shadow Legends using mom and dad's credit card.
Speaking of Raid Shadow Legends, this video is sponsored by...
No one, because we have taste. And Raid Shadow Legends belongs in the trash.
Know your fucking place, trash.
Bashing a terrible mobile game aside, the lawsuits you hear about aren't the real number.
Not even close.
To be blunt, even though bluntness is usually Raven's thing,
I will allow it.
there are over 100 active cases right now targeting addiction mechanics, behavior manipulation, and dark pattern monetization. Over 100. And most people have only heard of maybe 2 or 3 because the media barely touches the rest.
Wow.
But even if you haven't heard of them, you will. Because 2026 is when the first major cases hit trial or settlement. And that's when we get the rulings and precedents that decide how courts treat behavioral design in games.
And these aren't small claims. These cases argue that mechanics companies use to make people spend money exploit players the same way regulated industries do.
And that might sound good. Cracking down on predatory monetization is a great thing. But when the government is the one doing the cracking, that's where things get messy.
And if even one of these lawsuits lands, studios will have to rebuild everything. Monetization, retention loops, reward pacing, the entire spine that holds AAA live service together.
It would destroy
And you might
everything.
ask, where's the downside? Isn't this what gamers have wanted? And yes, long term, this pushes studios toward better games, but AAA can't adapt like that on the fly.
Exactly.
My frustration with microtransactions has never been the government needs to get involved and stop them. It's been predatory saying that people need to stop supporting them. And people aren't. By and large, they are raking in billions. EA comes to mind in particular, but many others as well. It is destroying the industry from the inside out. But I will leave that one there on that video. I'm going to share this in the description. And if you guys want the rest of it there, great take from Gothic Therapy. I have some other stuff to talk about with it as well. They followed up with an article. Everyone is talking about AAA collapsing. We got access to what the investors who fund the industry are preparing for. Writing Raven just put out a summary of our video on DEI Detected. This is what investors think is coming in 2026. And I think it does bode very not well for the future if one of these lawsuits lands, because it will set a precedent moving forward for what's even allowed in gaming. And the only thing that sustained these companies over the past few years has been microtransactions. And if the microtransactions get cut out of it, they're going to have to cut even more people out of their studios and go more to AI and destroy the entire foundation of the industry from the beginning. And maybe we will finally have another crash. I'll be fine, though. I can finally get to Lunar. PCV Titan for 2. Bring on the crash. The backlog is eternal. It is. And oh, by the way, with technology and indie developers, games will never stop now. Like in the 80s, it was really hard. You needed like special skills, understanding, education, coding, information, research. Now it's just like, you can figure it out.